Recording. Okay, beautiful. And I thank everybody for their help in muting yourself at this time. And if you have a question or comment, please utilize the chat box, or else we'll also stop though periodically, if that's okay, Greg, along the
Sure.
way to allow for the
Whatever
whole
you need.
time. Yeah, and I just want to make sure, like I said, people get to ask or share. Anyway, I wanted to say I don't have really a formal introduction for Greg, but he is just, I mean, talk about someone who has the whole package, who is blessed by God with a wonderful mind for both law, including law of Torah and Talmud, linguistic expertise and facility with that, a wonderful voice, which really, I think, belies a beautiful neshama and a great heart. And just, I mean, I could go on all day. So rather than going on all day, I'm going to turn it over to the one and only Gregg Kinkley from Congregation Sof Ma'arav, who will continue our Talk Story series tonight, our Jewish Talk Story series, with what makes us different and how we stay the same, the essence of Yiddishkeit as seen from the pandemic. So without further ado, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. After that introduction, I feel I need to introduce myself. But,
please go right ahead. You can say anything you want. Tell us about yours. Tell us your favorite color, whatever you want.
Yes, before we get into words of Torah, I wanted to put in a little explication for the title, because I gave two different titles to two different groups of people, and it is something that is a remez of my double life, because I spent, if you can call it that, my life. I spent the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s as an academe, and the 90s, the aughts, and the 10s as an attorney. So in my academic form, I made sure the title sounded like a dissertation. It has a colon in it. This is very important. Everything to the left of the colon has to be cutesy and a play on words, and then everything to the right of the colon is what you're actually talking about, okay? Now, to the other people, I said, I think it was Yiddishkeit in the time of COVID, 100 days of isolation, because today is the 105th day. So I thought if you get two Marquez, novels in at the same time, that's pretty good. But the lawyerly part of me is that, especially since the legislature is going on right now, this is a gut and replace. I kept the title the same, but I have a completely new talk now. So this talk will not pass constitutional muster. Therefore, with the preliminaries, if we're going to segue into Torah, then what I would like to do is share my screen, because as you all know, as good Yids, the first thing we need to do is say a brocha.
Ooh, yeah.
So I need to get the people down there. There. Oh, how do I?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just do that. There we are.
Okay.
Okay, and this is for you who may be young enough and remember Mitch Miller. Here's the bouncing ball. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher חידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו לעשות דברי תורה. And for good measure, קרב נא אדוני אלוהינו את דברי תורתך בפינו ותעמך בית ישראל. ונהיה אנחנו וצאצאינו וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמך. ברוך אתה אדוני, המלמד תורה לעמו ישראל. And the good old standby, ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בקר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני, נותן התורה.
You've covered all the bases of brachot, my friend. Thank
That's
you.
That's right. Noisei na Torah. Now, I'm going to release the screen temporarily, at least. There, we're back. I wanted to start by talking about another part of my life, something that happened ever since 9/11. After 9/11 struck almost instantly, I started a period of my life that I call the interfaith circuit. I teamed up with a Muslim who actually ended up getting into public service too. He's the head of Hawaiian housing, and sometimes a Christian. And we went around explaining how, religion really isn't a force that makes things bad. It's actually there for good. Sadly, we kind of had to explain those things. And maybe by our example, we showed that Jews and Muslims could befriend and not, have bomb throwing. So that had various amounts of success or lack of success. But I wouldn't have traded that time. I learned many things. And the thing that was the most impressive to me, I think, because I saw more of the practice than just the theory, is the things that we have as Jews in common with Christians and Muslims, and the things that make us different. And it struck me that if I went through some of the institutions, I call them institutions, they're really rubrics or whatever, the things that are definitive of Yiddishkeit, of being a Jew. Surprisingly, although they may change form somewhat, the other religions have it too. I just have a list here. The first one I think of is what we just did, brachas, okay? The blessings. Now, clearly neither the Muslims nor the Christians use blessings the same way we do. We use them really as a halachic, well, among other things. I wouldn't reduce it to just this, but they do have a halachic dimension where they prove up our intent to do a mitzvah, so we get credit for the mitzvah. It's a way of making sure we're on the track. But, the Southern Baptists, when you say something they don't like, they'll say, well, bless your little heart. That's a blessing. So they have that. And the Arabic for it sounds very much like Hebrew. Another category, another institution is kashrut, the law of food, of what is permissible or appropriate or fitting and what is not. And anyone who's been to New York City will know about those little, wagons, the halal. It sounds like they're going to sing something during Pesach. That's halal, that's right. But anyway, they have that too, so nothing really different there. That's cool. Emunah, faith, the articles of faith, the things we believe in. Well, let's face it, we're all it's a good thing that, copyright law wasn't instituted so early, because I have to tell you, these other guys took a lot of our best stories, They may have done different things with them, but it's pretty much the same book. As a matter of fact, occasionally I kind of think, one analogy I've said often is that Judaism's, given the times of the revelations, the relative times of revelations, Judaism is sort of like the old man. Christianity is like the man in his prime who has to go out to work every day, and Islam is like the teenager who is very rebellious. It explains a lot of their sort of cultic personalities. But another way to describe it is a sitcom. That really, we're the original sitcom, like Cheers, and then these guys had all these spin-offs, right? You had the Christian spin-off, and then yes, but more about that later. I digress, as I'm wont to do. Shabbat is another huge. Shabbat, in fact, is so huge it's hard to dispense of it and even treat it as one term. There's a time dimension to Shabbat, which I'll get into later, which I think is actually a difference. And there's a mitzvah or a work act level. And that really gets into the next category. So I think I would defer to that. And that's the concept of mitzvahs themselves. It's very clear to me that neither in the so-called New Testament nor in the Quran are there a counted number of actual orders and rules, as we have 613. So we certainly take them very seriously and count each one. But there are, of course, literally commandments in those books too. So there is some concept there. Again, the leitmotif for all of these things are the things we have in common. We have the concept, but we treat them in different ways. We treat ours in a, intrinsically Jewish way. And since we were first, of course, in a correct way. But once again, I digress. The most interesting shared thing, which is also the most symptomatic of the differences, is text. that Jews, Christians, and Muslims all are faiths not only from Abraham or Ibrahim or Abraham, but they are faiths built on text. The way these three groups treat the text, however, and approach the text is very, very different. And that's really going to be the recurring theme in this talk tonight, if I can manage to stay on point. The Jews have an unchanging text, so unchanging that, as you know, we all very lovingly transcribe things that we know are mistakes, grammatical errors, so that we never change the text. And then, of course, because we're so dick-dooky, we'll go off to the side and say what it should be, you know, like, well, this is a hanging participle or something, but actually he meant this, right? Or this is a tav, this is a yud, something like that. I think Robert Littman's favorite is the the long yud that becomes a vav, right? This little scribal thing. But we all have that. But the brilliance, the coping mechanism, the really Yiddish thing about our approach to text is that no faith can possibly survive as a black letter thing, because life is ever changing. Our partnership with Hashem changes every day, just as our marriages change, but we certainly don't have time for that one. So we've developed this capacity to find new things within the same old text. You know, we've all been there. This is why we can have shiurim on the parasha every week for years and never say the same thing twice, because every time we look at a parasha in the Torah for a certain week, one that we've read many times before and talked about many times before, the situation that surrounds us when we come into it has dramatically changed. For instance, now we have this pandemic around us, and that, as it were, inserts a new lens through which we see new things in the text we didn't see before. The Christians, and of course, you know, we don't have that much time. I'm going to be really ridiculously reductionist here. The Christians look at all the mitzvahs and all of the writing, of which they were quite familiar, at least in the early days, and said, well, you know, that's all well and good, but actually, the only really important mitzvah is that you treat everyone with loving kindness and treat everyone equally. And frankly, beyond that, you know, if you're going to believe in these other ones, that's okay. But, you know, I can derive every one of those other ones just from that one principle. So I'm really just going to write a nice sort of feel-good essay about loving people, and that'll be enough. And that's eternal. That'll never have to change. So we've got you beat, Jews. It's, you know, it's going to be great. As the time wore on, and of course the Muslims came in the 600s CE. Well, anyone who lived through the 60s knows that any ideology built only on love tends to kind of spiral downward after a while. It turns into first libertarianism, and then sort of hedonism, and then apostasy, and who really cares what's after that? It's kind of a problem. The Muslims saw this and saw that the Christians, by concentrating only on love and therefore having love be defined in the moment, were missing out on some of the principles that the Muslims thought were irreducible and could not be forgotten. They believed they saw the Christians actually becoming idolaters and worshiping Mary and starting to get other gods. And of course, we won't go into Nevi'im. We know we did that too, but we knew it was wrong, okay? So this was more institutionalized. So this was sort of this conservative backlash where it said, no, Hashem has come back. He's whispered in my ear, quite literally. There's had this guy write this stuff down. You have to follow these. So the other fascinating thing about the Quran to me, which is unlike the other two books completely, is that there were two periods of revelation for Muhammad in the Quran. One when he was in Mecca, when he was the underdog, and he was, you know, kind of not as happy with everyone around him at that time because he was fighting for his life. And then later in Medina, when he finally, I'm cutting out a lot of history here, but he'd finally institutionalized the religion enough that he could afford to be more magnanimous. So there are many ayat, or verses in the Quran, that say very specifically things about, you know, killing infidels. And then in another one that was written maybe 20 years later, while in Medina, when they were more worried about administrative problems like having enough pencils and things like that, they said, well, there's no compulsion in religion. That's okay. And, you believe in your thing, I believe in mine, we'll be fine. And yeah, you can marry Jews. They make great cheesecake. That's fine. So you have a problem there because, again, all of these faiths believe their text is sacred. So the Muslims actually came up with this idea called naskh, or abrogation, which means that a later verse can abrogate an earlier verse. Now notice, therefore, I'm just going to cut the Christians out here for now. Notice the interesting opposite approaches of the Jews and the Muslims. Both of these people, let's face it, guys, can we talk? There are things that are contradictory in our books. I get that. We handle it by reinterpreting and seeing that, you can make it make sense. This is a challenge. This is a way for us to understand what it really meant. These things can't be in opposition. There must be a reason why these two are together and how they can make sense being read together. The Talmud's full of those sorts of things. It seems like it's about 20% of what's in the Gemara is rationalizing two seemingly separate statements or contradictory statements, and we'll get to that in a minute. The Muslim just said, oh, no. Follow what I said more recently. Interesting indeed. I'm not sure how they flesh that out with the idea of an omnipotent Godhead, but that, my friends, is for them to worry about, not I. So now we're talking about the essence of an unchanging text, which is what you need, because after all, you have Hashem, who is perfect and evolved and makes no mistakes, and therefore he has no purpose in creating a text or dictating a text that's going to change because it's right the first time. But then you finally get civilized, you're in the promised land, you have to draw your laws from this unchanging text, and you find out that life is very messy. What are you going to do? So you institute these ways of dealing with the inconsistencies and finding the nuances and how you bend a rule that seemed obvious at first into all of its little component parts. Often done by definition, sometimes done by analogy, sometimes done by where things are in the text. All of these things, or even in concert, are done to make a new and living text of something that by definition can't be changed. Okay, now we're going to look at a specific instance of this idea of how new and old come together in the text and how we rationalize the two. So here I go sharing again. There he goes again. Okay, now I had this problem before. How do I get this thing down? There, can I do that? Good, I can, good. Okay, we're looking here. This is an Amud from Eruvin. This is the Masechta, the tractate of the Talmud that deals with making your Eruvs, right? Your little Shabbos domains so that you can do work in it. So here it says, Amar le Rav Chisda. So it says Rav Chisda, Rabbi Chisda, was talking to someone. Who was he talking to? Lahahu Midorabanan. To this, one of the rabbis from amongst the rabbis, Dahava Kamasader Agata. So he was talking to one of the rabbis who was tasked with collecting the Agadic stories that are in the Mishnah. So this guy really knows his stuff. And he wanted to pose him, Rav Chisda wanted to pose him a question, a difficulty, something in a verse he'd read in Torah that he didn't understand, or maybe he'd heard a story of and wanted some revelation from him. He figured, what better to ask one of these guys who's been dealing with the text all the time? So what does he ask him? He says, Me, Shemielach, what have you heard about, or how do you understand the following verse? Chadashim gam yeshanim. So, Chadashim gam yeshanim. Mahu. What does this mean? Chadashim gam yeshanim. That means the new as well as the old. He says, what does that verse mean? Well, of course, here in the 21st century, let's just say in the public school system, we don't really know our Chumash as well as others do. Of course, this is actually from the Psalm of Psalms. So I will put you on an even floor with the others. Here is the verse they're talking about. This is verse 14 of chapter 7 of the Song of Songs. And remember, Song of Songs is something that looks like often erotic love poetry, but the more chaste among us are always reinterpreting it into something about this relationship between Hashem and Israel, right? So this says Hadudaim. Who can forget the Dudaim? The mandrakes. Makes me think of Peter Sellers in that wonderful movie, but I move on. Hadudaim natnu reach. The mandrakes are giving us this wonderful fragrance, all this, really emotional stuff, right? Ve'al pesachenu kol magadim. And, at our doorsteps, all of these fine fruits. So you get this mental image. Here you are in your house, right? And you smell the wafting of like gardenias, right? The wafting of the mandrakes are coming in. It's wonderful. And all of these fine fruits are laid at your doorstep. What kind of fine fruits? The chadashim gam yeshanim. So since this is between Hashem and Israel, what we're saying is Hashem is saying, Israel, I am giving you the benefits of all my fruits, which have so much wonderful meaning in them, both new and old. I'm giving you new fruits, chadashim, and I'm also giving you old fruits, yeshanim, dodi, my beloved, right? Tzafantilach, I am storing them up for you. Now, of course, this is very interesting because this word tzafanti and tzafon, which also can mean north, besides laying it up, it also means to hide, right, or to make obscure. So there's a question, wait a minute. I'm about to go into an irrelevant drash, I'm going to stop. Okay, so now you know what we're talking about. It's this verse. He wants to know what are these things that Hashem has given Israel that's both new and old. What is that talking about? Okay, so here it's Chadashim Yeshanim. What is that? So Amarle, he told Rav Chisda this. Oh, I'll tell you what that is. Elu mitzvahs kalas, ve'elu mitzvahs chamuras. He's saying, those new, the new things they're talking about, those are the easy mitzvahs, the ones that are easy to do. And the other ones, the ones that are old, those are the tough ones, man. The ones like, thou shalt not kill. I hate that one. That's so hard, right? Or covet your neighbor's wife. That's a tough one. Okay, so Rav Chisda, this doesn't sit well with Rav Chisda. He says, Amarle, Rav Chisda says to him, V'ki Torah pa'mim nitna? So wait a minute. You're not going to disabuse us of the notion that there are mitzvahs then? You're saying easy and tough mitzvahs. Okay, so you're saying that there are new mitzvahs and there are old mitzvahs? He's saying, wait a minute. Are you telling me, therefore, that the Torah was revealed a little bit at a time? Some in the old time, some in the middle time, some in the new time, some are hard, some are easy, but it's over this period of time? That's not true. No, I reject your analysis. Ela, rather, I think, halalu midivrei Torah, one of these, unfortunately, this is a little difficult because it's just a demonstrative adjective, so you're not sure which one they're talking about, but one of them, either the new ones or the old ones. Midivrei Torah, they're talking about the words of Torah. The halalu, the other ones, midivrei sofrim, they're talking about the words of the sofrim. In other words, the exegesis of the masters of the Torah. This is what the new and the old mean. So we're still a little askance. We're not sure exactly what we're going to get. So let's turn to another master, good old Jay Friedheim's favorite philosopher and Torah exegete, the Vilna Gaon. This is a page from Kol Eliyahu, because the Vilna Gaon's first name was Eliyahu, right? The voice of Eliyahu in Erevin. So although there's not a lot of material, he did write some commentary on parts of the Talmud. Most of this is for Chumash and other things. But here, on Erevin, right down here, he has something for Daf 21, Amud B, that's exactly where we were. It says in the Gemara, it says Chadashim v'gam Yeshanim. So what does this mean? Okay, well, first of all, he's going to clear up something that was a little obscure in the text because just want to make sure we're not committing some unintentional heresy. Chadashim, the new ones, divrei sofrim, those are the words of the exegetes of the rabbis who are explaining what the Torah means. V'gam yeshanim divrei Torah, and the old ones are the words of the Torah. So here, is an analysis of a posuk in Shir HaShirim, whereby it is showed explicitly that there are two Torahs. Okay, there is the Torah that is written down, and then the Torah, this dichotomous version of the Torah, which is still directly from the Torah, but it is as it is understood through the rabbis and the Sofrim. So they go on and they say, Yesh lebe'er deheni birkas haTorah asher banu. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? V'natan lanu et Torato. Okay, so this is by way of explanation of saying, think of this. Think of the Birkat HaTorah. Think of our Torah blessing that we just did this evening when we started. It says, Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torah, who gave us the Torah. It says Natan, Loshen Aver. Natan is in the past tense. And then it goes on. Okay, Baruch Atah Hashem. This Yud is for Yedid, I think probably say. So Baruch Atah Hashem, Notein HaTorah. That's at the end of it, just in case we are forgetting a little bit. Here we are. See, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim Natan Lanu, who gave us the Torah. Then Baruch Atah Hashem, who is giving us or who gives us the Torah. Okay, so they're saying, in the end of that, notain, lashon hove. Notain is in the present. Is this a typo? Is someone being a little, mischievous with time? V'kena bracha shel achrei. So also the bracha that you make after the Torah is read, right? Same thing. Asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chaye olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Hashem noten haTorah. Pasach ba'aver, it starts with the past tense, natan. V'sayim b'chav, and it ends with the present. So what's going on here? I'm not really sure. Amnam, indeed, yitba'er v'yaduhu ma shekatvo. Okay, indeed, you can see that it's clear that we know that whatever was written in the Torah, right? Shebiktav kavar natna, that Hashem has already given us everything in the Torah, right? And it's written and it has been received. It's standing. It's established for Kayama. But HaTorah Sheba'al Peh. Here he's finally making the connection with what he's talking about, the new thing, the Divrei Sofrim. He's talking about the oral law. So this is the dichotomy between the written law and the oral law, right? So, however, HaTorah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law, Hagam, although ki kula kalula v'ramuz Torah, since everything is already in it and it's either understood or there's a metaphor for it, but it's already in the Torah and it's already been transmitted to Moshe on Sinai, and all of the Talmidim, all of the students from the past and in the future are going to find everything in it to the end of time, right? Ad 8 Chaitz. I love it. So this is the dichotomy we're talking about. This is how we make a seemingly fixed text living, which makes us able to follow it because we need something that follows our own movements. Okay, so now what? Where are we? I told you there were some things that were different, some things that made us different. We had brochas, kashrut, tefillah, emunah, Shabbos. You know, the Muslims have Friday. The Christians seem to think it's Sunday. Perhaps they're on a different time zone. Who knows? But there were three concepts I felt were significantly, materially definitive of us and something that the others don't have. And maybe I'm saying the same thing twice that way. Kedusha, minyan, and tikkun olam. So hopefully, if I have the time, I'm going to try to hit all three. Let me try to get you back here. How do you stop sharing? There, okay. Kedusha is this sense of the sacred. One of the wonderful things that took me quite a while to understand and appreciate, because I was a lawyer and for some time a civil rights lawyer, is that the concept of sacred and profane, or sacred and non-sacred, profane just sounds so negative, doesn't it? Of kodesh l'chol. That it's all about discrimination. Discrimination is a good thing. it's not necessarily always bad. I mean, illegal discrimination is bad, but discrimination can also mean good taste, right? Oh, he has a discriminating palate, right? It's just talking about judgment. So we've carved the world up into these two camps, the sacred and the not sacred. So in temple times, the temple was sacred. And then everything else was not sacred. And that's how we got our laws of tameh and tahor and things like that, ritually pure. Not only in space, but also in time, right? And here's where you get into Shabbats too. You have sacred time and non-sacred time. So you have the 6 days of the work week, and then you have Shabbat. These are things, again, as a motif that because they enforce a kind of discrimination that runs through the entire, if I can use this word, catechism, I don't think I'm going to, the entire liturgy that we have, make us essentially Jewish and not like the other Abrahamic faiths. With respect to COVID, discrimination and setting off spaces and times actually isn't too difficult, is it? Here we are, we're all separated. We can all have our own little kodesh. So actually, this is an aspect of Yiddishkeit that might not be challenged so much by COVID, although I must admit, I'm aware that I'm glossing over many difficulties because I want to get to the payoff, if there be one. The second one is the minyan. And I bring up the minyan because that is the thing that COVID clearly interrupts. This concept that certain religious obligations, among them certain types of prayer, certain honoring of those who have passed and are now dead, and other parts of reading the Torah, for instance, require a certain critical mass of people before they can be done. You all know probably the proof text for how minyans got to be 10. I won't get into that. But this brings up a modern halakhic problem. How can we Zoom a service in this day and age that requires a minyan for reading Torah, for saying Kaddish, which is, and I don't say this in any reproving way, sometimes the only reason people come to a service. How do we do that? Okay, well, here's where we'll once more go into the text and see how the dichotomous nature of the way we look at law and how we look at the Torah, new from the old, rather than letting the new win or taking the old out, but keeping the old and making it new, how that works. So here we have something from Pesachim. The question of what a minyan means in terms of prayer, it actually comes from this Amud, or could come, anyway, to be a little more, where's my pointer? There we are. From this Amud in Pesachim, see? It's 85b. This Mishnah starts off with something that's actually perhaps a little odd. Remember, Pesachim's talking about the Pesach, right? The offering back in the old days. They're talking about what you do with a paschal offering. Some of the okay, sounds like the Spirit of New Orleans just went by there. City of New Orleans, sorry, right? Spirit of St. Louis, City of New Orleans, right? Okay, this Mishnah is about what you do with the paschal offering when some of its limbs are long enough that they go outside the mizbeach or outside the room in which you're going to eat it, because it all has to be within the room. And a lot of it has to do with peeling flesh back, whether it's the kind of bone you can break or you have to do with a joint, so it's kind of gross. But the Gemara mentions at the very beginning that the Mishnah is talking about whether you're inside a room or outside of a room has to do with where you are with respect to the threshold. If you're on the threshold or outside, then you're outside the room. If you're at the threshold inside, you're inside the room. The first thing they say in the Gemara is, Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda said, Amar Rav, that Rav said, V'kein tefillah. It's these words right here. V'kein tefillah, which means, and so it is with prayer. In other words, what does it mean? Well, I have no idea. We'll have to read. Well, let's look at Tosafos. I think Dina was bringing up Tosafos before. Let's just look at Tosafos. And by the wonder of computer, we can make it almost readable. V'kein tefillah, what's it saying? Perush v'kuntris, according to Rashi, the guy in the pamphlets there, le'inyan seiruf v'ein nir'eh. He's saying, that Rashi is saying in his commentary that the idea of joining together people is available across a threshold. And they're saying, but this isn't true. This is not true. It says, here's the problem. It says, Di elu ne'emarin. In this part of the Tractate of Sota, what does it say? Mashma sugya. There's a sugya that says in the Gemara, the halacha k'Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, that the halacha is according to Yehoshua ben Levi. What does Yehoshua ben Levi says? He says, the Amr, afilu mechitza shel barzel ve'enu mafseches. He said, even a wall of iron does not separate people. So they're saying when you're figuring out if you have 10 people, you have a minyan in order to do prayer, even if there is a solid iron wall between, say, one person and the other 9, you bore right through it. It doesn't matter. You have a minyan. I think that would help us with Zoom, because this is more just sort of like electromagnetic energy. It's much more gossamer than an iron wall. But it goes on. But beperek kol gagas, all the roofs. This is in Erevin again. Mashma sesama, the gomra the machitza mifaseches. This one's saying that a machitza does actually separate people. Let's say roof, and therefore you can't combine people, say, in different rooms, because it forms a mechitza. Dika Amr, as in the idea of 9, that's a tisha, right? Tisha bekatona v'echad begadola. If you have 9 people in a small room and 1 person in a big room, ein mitzdarfin, you cannot put them together to make a minyan, la'inyan shofar, in order to blow a shofar, something that takes a minyan, Megillah, for the reading of the Megillah, nami. So here's our problem. We can just stop here on this one. We have a problem having a minyan over the computer because one guy is saying, you need 10 people in the same room. And we don't have people in the same room, right? We can see the room, but we're not in the same room. Another guy is saying, hey, it doesn't matter at all. So we have a makloikas here. I don't know how you resolve this. How would you resolve this? Well, it's interesting. The Shulchan Aruch ends up resolving it, saying that, no, you do need to have 10 in one room. But you know what? Here's where our Jewishness takes over. That's just black lettering it, frankly. That's really not what we're all about. We need to rise above that. Let me get back to share. The fact of the matter is, we have a need. We're going to be like this and separate for some time. We need to worship. We need to be with Hashem and with each other. Sandy, you're here, right? Yes. Sandy reminds us every Shabbos of how wonderful it is that our Sof people get together, and I feel it myself. Frankly, I'm really a poster child for this. I was not too happy with the idea of doing worship over Zoom because I didn't think you'd get the same feeling. But you do. And so what you do is you need to look back to your texts, you need to find a foothold somewhere, and then apply your policy to it and go forward. So you might say, look, there's a makloikas. Some people say you can have a minyan, you don't have to be in the same room. You got the guy who says the mechitza of barzel is enough, right? That the iron wall, it doesn't matter. But you look at it this way, you say, well, wait a minute now. All of our siddurim, all of our prayer books have exactly the same words in it. There must be a reason for that. The reason is that there's power in all Jews everywhere in the world saying the same words, with time zones accepted, the same time. So clearly we're already realizing that even before this pandemic and even before we couldn't see each other or be in the same room with each other, there were reasons why the Chazal had made these siddurim so that we would all be saying things at the same time in the same way. This is enough of a precedent of our own lifestyle and rooted in our tradition to say that perhaps it is okay to have a prayer meeting like that. So I'm just giving you one example of a way that Yiddishkeit changes every day to roll over, assimilate, and create new differences out of old text in order to cope with what we have today. Because law that doesn't change to meet the circumstances isn't anything that's really enforceable. And law that stays the same and forces everyone procrustinally, if that were actually a word, will end up in a revolution. We've seen that several times already. Okay, question before I get to Tikkun Olam, any questions? I know this is sort of a tour de force of a rather crazy sort of rambling.
If anybody wants to use the chat box, or you can wave your hand that way, or just wave your hand at me on the screen, or anybody want to unmute themselves and ask away. Anybody? If you could identify yourself, just say first name when I know who's asking the questions.
Yeah.
Anybody going once? Going twice?
Ooh, yeah.
Anybody?
Oh, Rabbi Glazer's on, and she said something very nice. Even an iron wall, proof text for why the families who celebrate at the Egel area at the Kotel can count folks on the other side. See? See, that's beautiful, right? There's a really good result from being able to move with the law. And you're not abrogating the law at all. You are realizing it, right? It's just that you have to understand what law is and what it means to us. We are people of law. And that, you know, we Jews by the Goyim are often called people of law in sort of a pejorative way, in a derogatory way, but it's because they don't understand what law is. Law is the way we meet the day. It's our ongoing partnership with Hashem. He expects us to use this law and to adapt it to new circumstances. And I'm sure he's happy when we do. That's the whole purpose behind that lovely story in Bava Metzia 59a, right? My children have bested me.
So, Greg, a couple of comments just real quick coming in.
Yeah, please.
Someone says, this is wonderful, very eye-opening. This is a new approach to me in interpreting halakha, Jewish law and tradition, through the root of through Talmud. Also, so COVID makes us all rabbis again. We need to learn and discuss our text to understand how to make it work.
Yeah. Isn't that a wonderful thing?
Yeah.
See, that's another thing. That's why Leviticus is smack dab in the middle of the Torah, right? Don't you love it? What other religion do you know that gave all the power to an elite group of priests with all sorts of secret rules, and then published a book where all the secret rules are right in the middle of the book that everyone has to learn and read, right? We're all rabbis in a way. We all get to do it. And now that those mitzvahs aren't even relevant because, you know, the Romans, I'm not going to name any names, but it might have been the Romans, got rid of our base. But hey, we're still remembering it. We're remembering it in our prayers. We're offering tefillah, which is like the sacrifices. That's just the most beautiful showing of how we didn't throw out the sacrifices. We never threw out the sacrifices. We understood their depth and not changed them, but understood them the way they were meant to be understood in this day and age.
And someone else pointed out the texts keep it possible for us to engage with those whose shoulders we stand upon, those who came before us, our ancestors, in a sense, to have a conversation, dialogue, if you will.
That's so beautiful. I'm going to say that I said that myself, if anyone.
Okay, you can. I'm sure this person will.
I'm adopting that as my own. Yeah.
And another comment: so Jewish to make it fit when we need to. We need circumstance. Right. Oh, okay. And I want to unmute or ask Sandy to unmute because she has a question and/or comment. Sandy, go ahead, please.
Sandala.
Thank you so much for explaining this Talmudically, because the essence of what we feel on Shabbat is so strong on Zoom. And for you to say that Hashem is happy that we've adapted so that we could stay cohesive as a community, just really sings to me, and I think to everybody who's experienced it, because there's no other, it's something incredible, something you can't even describe, the energy that's coming off of everybody being together, which we assume would only happen physically, but it's happening other than physical with Zoom.
Yeah, that's Greg, you have a response for that?
My internet is unstable, it says.
Oh, okay. You or the internet?
It's sort of ironic when we're giving pans of praise to Zoom that Zoom is zooming out. That's the zim of the
Sorry,
Zoom.
did you get the essence of what Sandy was saying or asking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you want to
And
respond?
I think it's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Mm.
I was going to say something about Tikkun Olam, because, again, I think we all have our own feeling about what it means, but it's interesting to look at the words. And this is where I get into Tomorrow's God and Judy's husband's wonderful book, Tomorrow's God, that because as we all know, Bob was really into this word Olam, and Olam is a fascinating word. And I just saw Lorna, bless her heart, in the non-Southern version of it, has given us several pages from BDB, right, showing all the different meanings of Olam, which is very interesting. I have my own weird take on it, but just very quickly, because I don't want to go over time.
You can. You're among friends. It's okay.
Okay.
A couple minutes over. Sorry.
The tikkun part ends up finally being in a family of words that goes back to a word you'd know, Ken. Not Ken like Ken Cohen, like Ken Aronowitz, but the nest, right? Remember, nest itself is from nestare, right? The place where you stay, where you are, right? So Ken is a nest. Tikkun, it's an abstract noun. It's a nesting and establishment, an amending, a making better, a making whole, and a place where you can live and sustain yourself. And then olam is this other word. I already know now I don't have enough time, but let me just cut to the chase, because it's very controversial. But if you look at the good biblical Hebrew glosses for the root, ayin, lam, mem, you'll find, of course, there's that root that has to do with youth, young men and women. It's how you get Alma in that controversial text about that the Christians end up using for Mary as a virgin. But again, I digress. But there are two main readings. One, olam has something to do with a world, right, or the world. And then there's this other meaning, alama, which means to hide. Now, the interesting thing is, when BDB talks about the olam that means world, he has all of these different Semitic languages and shows all the cognates. So clearly that meaning's there. When he gets to the word for hide, there isn't a single attestation of that root meaning hide in any other Semitic language. And I would suggest that the reason for that is it's a back formation. It never meant to hide. Alama ends up meaning to hide because it crept into the language from ne'elam, a PL of alam. What you need to know, I think, is that the root word in Semitic languages for ayin, lam, mem means to know. Okay? So olam is that which is known. So it's the thing that isn't hidden. It's the world. It's what we know. Ne'elam means not hidden. It means to be known. In other words, we don't know it yet, but it will be known. So in this way, tikkun olam means entering a partnership with Hashem to take the laws that are written in stone, as it were, and make them new, so that your olam, the things that you already know, shine a light on the things that are ne'elam, that are hidden from you, that you don't know, but are to be known, and you make them known. That's how you progress in the law. So that, to me, is what the hint that the terminology tikkun olam was getting. But I'm not really being fair, because there's just so much behind that. I just sort of cut to the chase. I want to leave you with one more thought. I don't know if Jay Friedheim's on, but I know one of his favorite verses in the Torah is tzedek tzedek tirdof. And I wanted to give what as far as I know, I'm not very deeply read on this, but I think perhaps a slightly different drash on tzedek tzedek tirdof. I'm aware, I think, generally, that there must be many drashes on why it says tzedek twice, right? Because it's a duplication and you don't need to do it. So clearly they're going to drash that. As Rashi used to say, these words cry for a drash, right? But I have another thought. Tzedek, again, tzadeh, daled, kuf, is a very interesting word family in Semitic. It spins out words that mean truth, honesty, friend, charity, sage. All of them are in there. Notice that tzedek is used here to mean justice. Notice that if you make that word feminine, tzedakah, you get charity. This sounds like that ancient the two so-called aspects of Hashem, the Adoshem and the Elohim part, right? The discriminating judgment, the black letter law, the text part, and then the new part, the charitable part, the loving part, the Ahava Rabbah part, right? And that's the, actually I had him reversed, sorry, Elohim is the judge. So since the tough in Tirdof can existentially be not only a sign of the second person or something to do with a jussive or an imperative saying, you shall pursue. What if that tov was slammed into tzedek and it's actually saying, tzedek tzedakah rodef, that justice pursues charity. In other words, you don't have, or follows, if you will, that you don't have justice unless justice leaves its mighty seat, as it were, goes into the world and starts running after pursuing charity, coming up with an answer that works for everyone and for society as a whole. And notice, it doesn't say you shall do justice, it says you shall pursue it. It's already understanding there's no way you're going to get there, because justice, I would say, just like vengeance, is the Lord's, right? We're never going to get there. But armed with these wonderful tools, the Torah of Hashem that he has given us, both the wit to understand and the chutzpah to try to make our own by helping us understand with each other what it means and how to produce it, that somehow we're tikkuning the olam, as it were, making the things, expanding our universe of things to be known into things that are known, making our olam bigger, destroying the walls of the ne'elam, and seeing how this wonderful creation and its system and how it works fits together according to the way we produce our own jurisprudential system and treat our fellow men, because after all, law is oftentimes the basic way that we end up interrelating on the social level. And we've seen, I'm sorry to say, without getting into politics, some rather disastrous confrontations on that lately. So I think we need to be ever mindful of how justice, anyone's concept of justice, has to pursue charity and bring loving kindness in to this law that also must never change.
Had a comment, justice will pursue charity. Love that one. I must have missed it. And I'll own up to that too. I missed that one. That's beautiful. That's just beautiful. And
oh, well, thank you. I mean, I'm just sort of saying it, it's not.
Well, you said it, so you can't take it back. Earlier you mentioned about bless your heart. Someone commented it's a Southern expression akin to Gesundheit on a sneeze, a protective device of sorts.
Oh,
so there you go.
That's true too. That's right.
Did you have anything else you want to get to, or is this?
No, those are the broad strokes.
Okay. I wanted to say, with all due respect to Lo Tachmod, it's just a covet and everything, but I really envy your ability to discern, your discerning abilities with Talmud and Torah, and really get to the heart of things with what you shared with us. So Yasher Koach, to say the least. It doesn't really express how amazing you are. So I want to invite anybody, if you have, we have a couple of moments here, any questions or comments, or Gregg, this is an amazing opportunity, folks. You don't want to miss this one.
You sound like a carnival Parker.
No, it's true, from the heart. Anybody, either just, I'm going to look around the screens. You can wave, you can use the chat box to wave your hand at me, or wave your hand at me.
I wanted to ask, is there a chapter 2 to tonight? Is there another episode?
Oh, the series, you mean the talk story?
Well, talk story and continuation of what Gregg started tonight.
Well, not Gregg in particular. I know Gregg is a really tough act to follow, but I'll talk about, actually, yours truly is going to bring to a close this set of gatherings, and then I'm going to talk to Gregg and the others about doing another round. So they're very well may be in the future, I hope.
I understand there's another book in the Talmud, and they do it on Saturdays.
Only request.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You mean are they talking about the Jay Friedheim thing?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. And we have a request for
We're in San
more
Diego.
time to devote to your idea and interpretation of Tikkun Olam. I wholeheartedly agree with that request. Let's see. Yes, this
Yeah,
time
I'm sorry. I
went
really
way
just
too
had to
fast.
touch and go. I'm sorry, what?
This time went way too fast.
Oh, yeah.
And also, you make studying Talmud fun.
Wow.
That's
Which is quite a
Well,
feat.
I like to hear that.
me too.
Studying Talmud was very, very, very hard for me because one thing I learned about studying Talmud is unless you have a general understanding of how the cultic system worked and what the history of Judaism is, you're not, I mean, the Talmud already assumes you know all that stuff. That's just a starting point, right?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
that took many, many years.
you take us to really amazing places. So thank you. I'm going to unmute everybody or ask you to unmute, especially if you have a question or comment, because I want to make sure again that everyone gets an opportunity if they would like to add a comment or ask a question of Gregg. Anybody at all. This is your chance. So wait, hold on. Just in.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my feeling is what I did with these texts is just adumbrate something I bet you every one of you already knows or at least feels. This is nothing new, but it's a way to celebrate who and what we are. I think we as a family are something really, really special. I think our approach to life is ingenious. And it's funny that it was the first thing out of the box and no one really improved on it. And I think when they tried to improve on it, it's because they didn't understand what they already had.
Yeah. Someone said there are Talmud learning circles around the country for beginners, so don't be put off as trying to if you feel intimidated of trying to make something to go beyond Torah to the
Ken,
yeah, please, Fran, go ahead.
what it seems to me, Greg, that we've always learned that even though an opinion is in the minority, that it's not thrown away.
Right.
So what about the guy that said, "Oh no, you can't breach this wall"? Is that judgment continues even if it's in the minority, correct?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's the other way around. The guy that says you can't breach the wall, that 9 and 1 don't form 10, that's the one that's the halacha. That's the one that the Shulchan Aruch takes as the law. The one who's in the minority has said that you can go ahead, that you can be in different rooms and it's okay.
Oh, I didn't understand. Okay, thank
But it
you.
is, yeah, but it is mentioned. I mean, I hate, this is a big fat lahavdil, but in much the same way that a Supreme Court case with maybe a 5-4 decision will have dissents that are longer than, why would they print those, right? I mean, those are things that come up later. That's a big lahavdil. There are a lot of other things going on there.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
Judy.
just like
Those-
taking along the broken tablets. You always keep the memory of even something that's lost or superseded.
Right.
Bringing it to, I would say the one who said the iron wall does separate 9 and 1 did not live in the time of COVID and Zoom. So here we are superseding because we have to, if we want to continue doing what we're doing.
Yeah, and I want to say something very seditious. Don't ever quote me on this, but I don't think Hashem really cares. I think what he wants is that we're concerned enough about it that we argue with each other and try to follow it and figure out what it is. I think that's what we're about. That's why the Muslim approach always struck me as so sad in a way to me, because they're just saying, oh, these two compete, just forget that. Just do this. It gets very black lettery that way. There's, in the legal systems of the world, right? The Anglo-Saxon American legal system with case law that I think is so inspired, frankly, by Torah and Talmud. In the Roman, I mean, it figures so well that it's the Roman law that has these things. Like the Germans who take the Roman law version. They try, just like engineers, they try to come up with every possible circumstance, write it out and say what happens, right? But the thing is, life is just too complicated. You just can't do that.
You know,
So
Judy, to touch on the point that you made, I mean, the whole concept of time being a matter of perspective and angle, right? So
yes.
this idea of being in the time of COVID helps us get that angle and understand why we want to preserve that judgment.
Yes. Yes, that might even be part of the reason we have this pandemic right now. This was part of the revelation for those who were willing to listen and see.
A
Yep.
couple of comments. It's the friction of discussion that keeps things alive
Yes.
in Judaism, and kavanah is a very important element to it
Right.
all as well. Our intention, I guess, in terms of interpreting law, as you said, that plays an important role.
Yeah, he's on the Supreme Court now.
There. Well, I must commend you, Greg. Unlike Moses on Sinai, you finished on time. So, I mean, very nice. Yashka. I hope everybody had a chance to make a comment if you wish or wanted to, or ask a question. And yes, I wholeheartily agree. I think we should get together and have another session like this, perhaps maybe after Tisha B'Av. But we'll effort to arrange that. In the meantime, I have a very, very tough act to follow because I'm going to finish up next week with this series of talk story sessions. And Greg, you talked about tzedek, justice, and I'm going to talk about two other words that are very much in people's vocabulary these days. And the title of next week's session is going to be "You Shall Not Wrong or Oppress the Stranger, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt, how racism and slavery are looked upon through the lens of Judaism." And I want also not only to share with you views from rabbis across the spectrum of Judaism, but I would love to hear what all of you have to say as well. So, and I wish I could tell you the time, but I'm vacillating between, because now we've had 2 sessions at noon and 2 at 7 p.m. So I'm just wondering, and I'm gonna have to decide by tomorrow. So the word will get out. Also very important, I'll send the recording rather of this session to you, Greg, and also to Sandy, who can make it available to anyone who wishes. It'll also be on our e-blast tomorrow from Temple. And once again, Yashikov, Greg, and thank you everyone for a wonderful response to this.
I'll definitely be to your thing, Rabbi Ken. That sounds like about the most timely thing I've ever heard.
Well, I'd love a person who's done civil rights law to join. So please, we'll talk during the week. But anyway, thank you one and all. And I can say this now because I think I can see 2.5 stars, if not 3. It's Wednesday night. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. See you on Zoom. See you next week.
Love that old-fashioned halakha.
That's it. Be well, everybody. Thank you so much. Shalom.
Call it couple, Greg.
Take care.
Thank you.
Well done.
Bye-bye.
Well done.
For hosting. Ken.
Thanks for coming.
You're very welcome, all. Thank you.